How immense could this man's body be? A single step was enough to make the very earth tremble. The servants couldn't believe it was an earthquake, until they saw the young master, Hyun. Then, they all froze in shock. He weighed several hundred pounds, yet his dream was to become the leader of the martial arts alliance. In his current state, even a mosquito landing on his neck was enough to make him collapse from the strain. Even his pants had split at the seams. This broken-down body. It's completely useless. But in his past life, he was a supreme martial arts master, sent back in time for one reason: to deal with the demon of chaos. Because of that monster, the entire martial world had been drenched in blood. Any clan that dared to oppose him was annihilated. His own parents were lost in the chaos the demon unleashed. For that reason, a nobody like him was taken in by 6 Grand Masters of the righteous faction. He endured a hellish training worse than death itself, becoming the #1 master, only to be sent back to the past. But he never imagined he'd be trapped inside this obese body, a body that could barely walk, let alone cultivate martial arts. Back in the present, he was being treated by the royal physician, Jang Seon. Hyun struggled to remember. That chaotic fiend is after the supreme Yang Ginseng. He had to get his hands on it first. The time he had until then was only 6 months. He suddenly roared, "I only have 6 months left, you old geezer." The physician was deeply offended, but his father's reaction was completely different. Seeing his son awake, he clung to him like a puppy. His love was genuine, but it was getting hard to breathe. Afterwards, Hyun demanded to go outside for a walk to clear his head. His father immediately called for a massive sedan chair, the largest one, reserved especially for him. The carriers had to be the strongest men available. How in the world was he supposed to lose weight like this? He insisted on walking himself, so his father had the guard, Hoan Hon, support him. The sight brought tears to his father's eyes. From the age of 10 until now, this was the first time he had ever seen his son walk on his own 2 feet. It was his fault for spoiling him so much. All he ever did was eat and sleep. It would be a miracle if he didn't end up like a pig. The servants who saw him walking were so moved, they looked like they were watching a grand performance. But poor Hoan Hon felt like he was about to be crushed to death. In the following days, he trained relentlessly, walking several laps around the courtyard. But this 1,000-pound body showed no signs of change. He decided to step on a scale to check his progress. The result? An entire herd of pigs couldn't make the needle budge. In fact, the rope snapped instantly. His guard tried to console him, saying that losing weight isn't something that can be done overnight. You must focus on your diet, reducing the sugar and starches you consume. Then, you must eat foods and perform exercises that will build your muscle. Young master, your condition may take a long time to stabilize. But Hyun wasn't listening. He tried to remember the demon of chaos, but it was no use. He couldn't even recall his face. This life regression is already a failure. Strangely, he could remember every other detail, just not the most important one. But he's sure to appear in Anhui City to find the supreme Yang Ginseng. I can use that chance to find him. Imagining the scene where he crushes the villain with his invincible power, a smug grin spread across his face. And after I take care of him, I'll finally get the peaceful life I've always dreamed of. Ha ha ha. Seeing this, Hoan Hon thought the young master had lost his mind from the stress. He frantically ran to find a doctor, who rushed to the scene, Jang Seon. At the age of 30, he took part in the royal examination to become the emperor's physician. He surpassed countless master healers to earn his place in the palace. At 50, he achieved enlightenment and created his own unique school of medicine. This man, he is the key. To help him become handsome, to forge a six-pack. He asked the doctor if there were any miracle elixirs for rapid weight loss. Such things exist, he was told, but it would take at least 3 years for them to work. Then what was the point? But at that moment, the old man conceived another, much faster method. If walking on land wasn't working, they would try walking underwater. They finally reached a nearby stream, leaving the palanquin bearers completely exhausted from the journey. As Hyun slowly stepped in, he thought to himself. Walking underwater actually felt incredibly soothing for his muscles. The immense pressure on his body seemed to melt away. But then, suddenly, he slipped, and just like that, he plunged into the deep end. Hwang Won couldn't even react in time. He just assumed his master was enjoying a leisurely swim. After all, Hyun could hold his breath long enough to rival a world champion. Oh. Realizing his master was actually drowning, he frantically dove in for the rescue. But it was useless. Normal men like them could never hope to lift Hyun's colossal body back to shore. Meanwhile, our hero had already lost consciousness. A memory flashed before his eyes, from when this body was only 2. It was clear he had endured something truly horrific. His mother had died protecting him. Just then, a young woman managed to pull him from the water. Back at the estate, Hwang Won and the physician, 𝐒𝐒𝐒, were facing the full wrath of Hyun's father. Learning that the royal physician was responsible, he nearly sent the old man to the next life. Thankfully, the guards managed to intervene. Just then, Hyun's older sister, 𝐒𝐒𝐒, arrived to announce that her brother was awake. This gave Jang Seong a precious moment to explain himself. He quickly recounted how the young master of the Namgong Clan had broken the engagement. His young master had become desperate, wanting to reclaim his physique as fast as humanly possible. He insisted that the underwater walking method was highly effective, just not meant for a place as deep as that waterfall. In Hyun's chambers, he had finally awakened. Seeing his beautiful sister, he could hardly believe his eyes. How could a guy who was so fat and dim-witted have a sister who was a peerless, heavenly beauty? Even her attendant was no ordinary person, effortlessly helping him to his feet. It turns out, she was the one who had rescued him the day before. The next day, as he was carried to his training spot, the servants seemed strangely cheerful. Something was definitely off. It turned out they were building him a 5-star, custom kiddie pool. This was his sister's idea, a way for him to train without visiting that dangerous stream again. What's more, everyone who saw him walking about cheered him on with genuine smiles. They were pouring their sweat and energy into this seemingly pointless task. So why did they look so incredibly happy? He decided to ask Hwang Won about his father. The family head is a great scholar, revered by every academic in the entire world. He is a symbol of purity and integrity. This news came as a complete shock. His father's daily demeanor didn't seem to match that description at all. During every famine, he opens the storehouses to feed and clothe us. He is respected by all the people of Andong-hyun. It hit him then. He was born with a golden spoon in his mouth, starting life at the finish line. He would never have to work a day in his life. He burst into a fit of laughter, baffling everyone around him. By the next day, the pool was complete. Hyun even had a guard prepare a large stone ball to chain to his leg for training. But the guard completely misread the situation, hurling the massive stone into the pool with all his might. The force yanked Hyun right in after it. What is with these people? And so he sank to the bottom of the pool like the Titanic. His real goal was to cultivate his internal energy, something that was easier to do while moving underwater. The ancient masters, foreseeing this exact problem, created a unique method of internal cultivation. It was called the spiritual heart core method. Instead of gathering spiritual energy in the abdomen, it focused energy directly into the heart, using the body's blood vessels instead of its qi channels. Channeling his energy through the cultivation technique, he finally achieved a breakthrough. Spiritual energy began to replace his internal power, flowing directly into his dantian. He could now feel the very current of the water, bending it to his will. Next, he unleashed the most powerful Shaolin technique, the 100 Steps Divine Fist, causing the lake's surface to erupt violently. For the next while, he remained submerged in the lake, training like a man possessed. Using the knowledge from his past life, he mastered the palm technique with incredible speed. A month flew by, and it was finally time to return. The first order of business, weighing himself against a pig. If he couldn't even conquer losing weight, how could he possibly face his master again? This time, the scales clearly dipped, and the rope didn't snap like before. He burst out into a crazed laugh, then rushed to the butler to celebrate. This marked his very first victory in this new life. He carefully compared the two power sources. Internal power was built through relentless practice of martial arts, but spiritual energy was different. It required absorbing spiritual herbs and artifacts. This was a monumental leap forward, achieved in a single moment. Therefore, he absolutely could not miss out on the supreme yang ginseng. But first, he needed to absorb some other spiritual medicines. In the days that followed, he continued to absorb spiritual energy through his meals, while also doing physical training with his guard. 2 months passed in a flash. He was back underwater, perfecting his palm technique. A single punch unleashed a devastating force, shaking the very depths. His guard, Hwang Won, couldn't believe his eyes. This was a true martial art. How could that gluttonous worm be this powerful? But those words happened to reach his father's ears. He erupted in fury. "Who are you calling a gluttonous worm?" He then ordered the guard to be locked up. Though it sounded like a punishment, he really just wanted the guard to get some rest. He'd worked far too hard for the young master recently. His father, meanwhile, was ecstatic. His beloved son actually possessed unparalleled martial power. Although he wanted Hyun to pursue academics, he would still support his son's martial arts training. Then, his expression turned deadly serious. "Shao, Prepare the ink and paper. I must send a message to the imperial palace. The next day, his father presented him with a book, The Universe Divine Scripture, with a smug look on his face. This is a secret manual bestowed by the emperor himself. Clearly, his father's status was anything but ordinary. He had merely mentioned that his son had started training, and the emperor personally selected the finest manual from the entire imperial vault. Ha ha. Little did he know, his father had to use some rather dramatic language to get it. Your Majesty's heart no longer holds me as it once did. Have the burdens of the state made you forget your loyal servant? Sounds like he's whining to a lover, doesn't it? What a scene. Not only that, but his brother-in-law was sent to personally teach him. His name was Jaemon, his older sister's husband. He arrogantly boasted, "The 𝐒𝐒𝐒 family is the most renowned martial family in all of Hubei." He had no idea that in a real fight, he wouldn't even be a warm-up. But Hyun couldn't reveal his true strength yet, so he knelt and accepted his brother-in-law as his teacher. Seeing this, his father was moved beyond words. Since when had his son become so polite and respectful? But when he tried to stand up, his body wouldn't budge. He needed a hand from his new master. In the following days, his brother-in-law became a different person during training, acting like a master, daring to lecture him. Unable to stand it any longer, Hyun challenged him to a duel using the Six Harmonies fist. Was the master obsessed with the basics, or did the student truly understand the core principles? At first, Jaemon thought it was a joke, but when Hyun taunted him, "If you're weak, don't pretend to be strong," he immediately agreed, even sealing his internal energy to make the fight more balanced. As if that wasn't enough of a handicap, he even bound his own hands during their clash. He opened with Fierce Dragon Probes the Sea, a move with both speed and power, but it was still too slow. His large frame made it impossible for his opponent to land a clean hit. His brother-in-law was stunned. How could he link the techniques of the Six Harmonies fist so flawlessly? Hyun's stamina was limited. He had to secure a swift victory. He effortlessly took his brother-in-law down, and even though he tried to yield, he was knocked unconscious anyway. Now he was all bandaged up, unable to even scratch an itch. When he asked his wife for help, she was just overjoyed at how incredible Hyun had become. "I told you, our Hyun is a martial arts genius." Heh. Meanwhile, Hyun strolled through the streets. He'd never seen people so happy, all because that villain, the agent of chaos, was gone. The chaos he caused was unimaginable, with corpses littering the streets. Everyone had been forced to live in hunger and fear. When they saw Hyun, they rushed over in disbelief. "Sir, you can truly walk?" Then, they showered him with invitations and gifts. He could only think to himself, "I just came out for a light stroll, but you all are just weighing me down even more." But he couldn't bring himself to refuse their heartfelt kindness. This only strengthened his resolve to save the Murim. He had to ensure these good people wouldn't have to die. Suddenly, he noticed a martial artist tailing him. The man thought he was hallucinating. How could a fatso like him possibly detect a trained shadow? But before he knew it, Hyun was already standing right behind him. The man unleashed a powerful strike. His inner energy was nothing to scoff at. While Hyun was still stunned on the ground, the attacker had already fled. Coming to his senses, he cursed, "You coward, where did you go?" To keep the townspeople from worrying, he pretended he was completely unscathed, despite the pain. This ignited his determination to train even harder and become stronger. Meanwhile, his father and older sister were in a serious discussion. His father wanted to recommend Hyun to become a world-renowned general, but she argued it was far too soon. They agreed his sudden change was surely due to the Namgong family breaking off his engagement. As it turns out, the young lady of the Namgong family never wanted to marry. She's always wanted to walk her own path. But Hyun's father was determined to propose the marriage once more. And soon enough, representatives from the Namgong family arrived. They were already trying to figure out a polite way to refuse. Meanwhile, Hyun headed to the slums, searching for information on the Supreme Young Ginseng, but he couldn't find a single beggar anywhere. A nearby resident told him it had been over 20 years since the last beggar was seen in Anping County. The local lord had built homes for the wanderers and allowed them to lease land. Hyun had been trying to find the Beggar Sect branch to gather information. Who would have thought that beggars now lived in such luxurious places? At that very moment, the head of the Namgong family, Hansu, was at that same Beggar Sect branch, seeking files on the blue-haired man known as Hyun. Information on the Demon Prince is classified under special management. You cannot trade for this until you receive permission from the main branch. The main branch has personally classified the file on the Demon Prince as our ultimate trump card. But the client was one of the wealthiest men alive. The Namgong family head threw down a mountain of silver, but it wasn't enough. A request had to be sent to the main branch. Next, he calmly removed a ring from his finger. It was the Emperor's ring, a treasure that promised the full protection of the Namgong Clan to its possessor. At that very moment, Hyun himself arrived at the Beggar Sect branch. But this Beggar Sect was far too lavish. Their den was a magnificent, high-class building. The guard at the door called him a fatso. "We have an esteemed guest inside. We're not accepting loiterers." But Hyun paid him no mind, revealing his identity and walking straight inside. With his immense power, who in the world could he possibly fear? And yet, this nobody managed to land a hit, even daring to call him a pig. "Did your eardrums get fat too?" he sneered. "I clearly told you to stand down." At that moment, something inside Hyun finally snapped. "Do you have any idea who my father is? You're about to learn a world of pain." Meanwhile, the branch master had delivered a full report on Hyun to the Namgong family head, but the commotion outside was growing far too loud. Back in the fight, Hyun's opponent had to admit it. He had gravely underestimated him. How could a man weighing hundreds of pounds move with such blinding speed? He wielded the boundless sword style, but with his pathetic level of skill, it was completely useless against Hyun. If he had just apologized, Hyun would have spared his life, but the fool only grew angrier, pressing his attack. "How dare you speak of the great Namgong clan with that filthy mouth of yours?" He even drew his blade to threaten him, only to get beaten into a stupor for his troubles. All that could be heard were the agonizing screams of the Namgong family guard. Just then, the young master of the Namgong clan finally made his entrance. Hyun instantly recognized his technique, the violent Thunder God Fist. But first, he had to block it. With his massive body, he couldn't face the Thunder God Fist head-on. The technique was a martial art that created an explosion of heat. By twisting the energy within the user's fist, Hyun planned to use his own spiritual energy to reverse its flow. But in that moment, Hyun recognized the man before him, and his concentration wavered. This man was his former sword master. No wonder the technique felt so familiar. But in the end, the result was the same. He was sent flying. The young master thought to himself, "This large man is no simple oaf, to think he could disperse the power of my thunder fist." Hyun struggled to his feet, a murderous glint in his eyes, but his attendants quickly swarmed in to protect him. And just like that, he collapsed. So much for some grand, earth-shattering comeback. It was then that the branch master realized the large man before him was none other than the feared young master Yu. He rushed over to provide aid, shouting, "Which villain dared to harm the young master like this?" Instantly, every eye in the crowd turned to the Namgong young master, filled with hatred. Helpless, he glanced toward the head of his family. The family head, finally understanding the gravity of the situation, ripped the intelligence report on Hyun to shreds. This information was now worthless, and soon he would have to face the wrath of Hyun's father. If the young master wasn't Hyun's future brother-in-law, the old man would have already ended him. The Beggars Union branch master could only drop to his knees and beg for forgiveness. After all, this incident had nothing to do with the Beggars Union. He then sent a telepathic message to the Namgong head. "You should kneel and apologize too. This is someone the Emperor himself holds in high regard. His Majesty has also summoned our son-in-law to the palace." Hearing this, the Namgong family head went pale with terror and immediately fell to his knees, pleading for his life. But the old patriarch's fury was boiling over. Whoever dared to harm his precious son would pay with their life. He was still unconscious, hovering between life and death, but just then, Hyun burst back onto the scene. However, his new, rather feminine appearance left everyone completely speechless. His older sister had tied up his hair for him. He actually looked kinda cute. Seeing him return, the branch master immediately started sucking up to him. "You are truly magnificent, young master." To take a punch from young master Namgong and be completely unharmed. This was clearly just blatant flattery. This guy clearly had a death wish. Hyun couldn't be bothered with him and walked straight to the Namgong head to greet him. According to their family ties, the man was technically Hyun's elder clansman. Then he turned and asked, "Father, what's this about going to the imperial palace?" "I intend to report the wicked deeds of the martial arts world to His Majesty, the Emperor." He was clearly blowing things way out of proportion, as if the Emperor had time for something like this. Model. But the one who dared to wound him? He wasn't getting away that easily. Hyun stormed over to Nam Sung and landed a resounding slap across his face. By status, Hyun was his uncle, despite being only 17 years old. He had waited an eternity for this moment, a chance to strike that very cheek. Though fury burned in his gut, Namgong was powerless to retaliate. He had to understand that this boy would one day become the Sword King, one of the 6 saints of the righteous path, and also Hyun's master. But that master was a bit of a sadist, whose favorite hobby was torturing his disciple with hellish training. Now that he finally had a chance for payback, you can bet he was going to take it. During the fight earlier, he'd lost focus upon recognizing his master. Tears of joy had streamed down his face, ecstatic at the chance to give the future Sword King a lesson. Afterwards, everyone sat down to discuss the matter. While the Namgong Clan was still figuring out how to refuse the engagement, our chubby main character casually rejected the marriage himself. He was busy training to save the world. Where would he find the time to get a wife? He then declared that a marriage forced by a promise from a past generation, without the consent of those involved, was fundamentally wrong. Even if I've spent my life buried in this humble place called Anping, when will I ever escape this life of a frog in a well? I am meant to serve His Majesty the Emperor, to carry the weight of the nation on my shoulders, and dedicate my healthy body, my righteous spirit, and my youthful vigor to protect the people and become the leader of the Martial Arts Alliance. His father listened in absolute horror. The martial world was a place teeming with street thugs and villains who spread nothing but chaos. Hyun's words were a veiled threat to the Namgong Clan, and even they were intimidated, not daring to utter a single word. With that, he turned to leave, saying their silence was all the agreement he needed to end the engagement. Hyun then summoned the local leader of the Beggar Sect to inquire about the supreme young ginseng. He needed information on the current state of the martial world and the whereabouts of his old masters. The debt from that year. He would make every single one of them pay. According to the beggar, the martial world was split into 3 factions: the righteous, the evil, and the demonic, none of which posed a major threat. But in 10 years, that peace would be shattered, all because of the one known as the Chaos Demon Child. A dangerous glint appeared in Hyun's eyes. It was time to find a new disciple. Namgong, my dear future master, just you wait. Ha ha. The very next day, he began training again, making his guards anxious. He had just been knocked unconscious the day before. They desperately wanted him to rest and recover. His older sister also came to him and asked, "What do you think you're doing? You're not resting or taking care of yourself at all." Guard Hyun saw her personal guard and was instantly smitten. His sister explained that the martial world is a treacherous place. It was the very reason their mother had passed away. In their household, the martial world was a scar that was never to be mentioned, yet he wanted to dive right into it. Hyun told his sister he wasn't the weak boy he used to be. Now, he'd take down anyone who stood in his way. "Don't you worry, sis." Her demeanor shifted 180 degrees as she reached out and poked Hyun's chubby cheek. "My little brother, you've really grown up. I didn't even recognize you." This was the warmth of family, a feeling he never had in his past life. As time flowed on, the day to re-enter the martial world finally arrived. From a figure weighing 1,000 pounds, he had been forged into a handsome warrior with a chiseled 6-pack. His father saw this and grew incredibly worried, having only ever known his son as the chubby boy he was. "You look far too thin. I'm afraid the wind might blow you away if you go outside." Hyun wanted to venture out and see the world, but his father vehemently protested. But he stubbornly insisted on going to Anhui City to find the supreme yang ginseng, promising his father not to worry, that he would absolutely return safely. Knowing he couldn't stop him, his father had no choice but to agree and let him go. Meanwhile, our hero was reveling in his newfound freedom, finally able to act as he had in his past life. But the moment he opened the door, a grand palanquin and 20 bodyguards were waiting for him. So much for stealth. It turns out his father had ordered Guard Hyun to arrange an escort for his trip to Anhui Citadel. But this mission was top secret. He couldn't afford to be seen. He had to shake these guards. After a moment's thought, a plan began to form. He called everyone over, saying, "It's getting late. Let's rest for a day before we depart." Then, he invited them all out for drinks, leaving even Steward Hoang completely baffled. The two of them drank late into the night. His sister even stopped by to say her goodbyes. But upon hearing the rowdy scene, she decided to leave them to it. She had no idea that Hyun had already slipped away, leaving behind a heavily sedated Steward Hoang. The steward wasn't just drunk. He had consumed a poison that temporarily scatters one's internal energy, leaving him unable to move until morning. It was a special concoction given to him by the royal physician for self-defense. Just as he was about to leave, his sister appeared before him once more. She immediately pulled him into an embrace and pleaded, "Please, take care of your health, and don't do anything dangerous. If things become too difficult, you can always come back. Father and I will always be here for you." The next day, he arrived in a small village where the locals thought he was either a criminal or a dog thief. He certainly looked suspicious enough. He was forced to invent a cover story, claiming to be Jin Dae-gil, a servant of the Zhou family from Anbin County. The former royal knight Yu Seon-han sent me to find something for his beloved son. He then asked if they'd seen a strange rock on the desolate mountain that emitted a red light. Most of the villagers just looked at him with blank confusion. But an old man spoke up, saying he'd seen it a few times while wandering the mountains. When the sun sets in the west, he explained, a certain rock catches its last rays and glows, as if a red light is shining from within. He said the place was deep within the wilderness, on a peak known as Bao Thap, but he urgently warned him not to go, for that was the territory of the Nine Dragons Fortress. They're not ordinary bandits, the old man whispered. They are truly evil, and there's no line they won't cross. This news only strengthened Hyun's resolve. The supreme young ginseng had to be there. After all, besides the Nine Dragons Fortress, no one would ever dare venture into that territory. He then begged the old man to guide him to the fortress. The elder was terrified at first, but one look at Hyun's pleading, nearly crying eyes was enough to fool him into agreeing. And so, the two of them journeyed deep into the forest, finally arriving at their destination. However, he couldn't let the old man get hurt. After getting the directions he needed, he sent the elder back to the village with a generous reward. Just as the sun sank below the horizon, a red light began to flicker. It was the supreme young ginseng. With lightning speed, he leaped across the rushing stream, thinking to himself that if the bandits found him, a fight in the water would be to his advantage. He finally reached their hideout, but he couldn't be bothered to engage them just yet. The first step was to use his spiritual energy to locate the supreme yang ginseng. But then, he spotted a thug mercilessly beating a woman, while her child cried helplessly beside her. He knew he had to focus on the greater mission, but in the end, his conscience wouldn't allow it. A single punch sent the brute flying. He then made quick work of the other thugs, freeing the fortress's captives. Everyone, listen closely. From this moment on, I will show you how to escape this hell. He then asked how many bandits were in the fortress. Over 50. The numbers were staggering. Worse, some of them were skilled martial artists. This was going to be difficult. He realized his only option was to stall for as long as possible, to give them a chance to escape. A mountain bandit moved in to investigate, but was taken down before he could even react. First, he had to take out the man in the watchtower. With blinding speed, a single punch was all it took to demolish the entire structure. That was the signal for everyone to make a run for it. To sow even more chaos, he set a nearby house ablaze. The sleeping bandits awoke in a panic to the spreading fire. As they tried to flee, he blocked their path, proudly claiming responsibility. If you've got the guts, come and get me. The entire camp erupted into a chaotic frenzy, all of them chasing after him. Facing these numbers head-on was suicide. He could only pick them off one by one. And just like that, they began to fall. In a situation like this, a direct fight is my only option. Martial arts would consume too much spiritual energy, so it was best to focus it in his legs for maximum speed. The gatekeepers saw the massive fire and panicked. We're the ones who let him in. If the chief finds out, we're dead men for sure. The prisoners seized the opportunity to get out of there, running as fast as their legs could carry them. They weren't about to die here. Meanwhile, Hyun's spiritual energy was nearly depleted, and his body began to stagger. He just needed to buy a little more time so everyone could get away safely. But suddenly, a powerful blow sent him flying. There were 5 of them, and they all knew martial arts. This was going to be tough. In an instant, he was completely surrounded. Yet, Hyun put on a confident smirk. Bring it on. I've never been one to back down from a fight. The bald man was the leader of the Nine Dragons camp, So-san. He found Hyun amusing and wanted to recruit him for his crew, but our hero simply sat down, stalling for time to recover his spiritual energy. Recruiting talented bandits was harder than it looked, but someone with your strength and resourcefulness, you would be a perfect fit. The chief felt something was off. The man before him clearly had no inner power, yet he was meditating. Is this some kind of illusion? Just then, Hyun recovered a portion of his spiritual energy, and his aura became terrifying. He looked at the chief and said, "How can a wolf ever work under a dog?" The leader's face twisted with fury. He ordered his men to charge all at once, planning to crush him with sheer numbers. And just like that, Hyun was overwhelmed, beaten, and sent flying. They weren't individually strong, but their coordinated pack attacks were flawless, like a pack of hyenas. Even a lone lion could be taken down by them. Hyun knew he had to risk it all. He unleashed the drunken 8 Immortals step, effortlessly weaving through their attacks. Even the chief was stunned by his impossibly fluid movements. Next, he used the Flying Heaven Formless technique, striking the Nine Dragons leader with lightning speed, but it was only enough to wound him. His strength completely spent, his only option was to escape by diving straight off the cliff, but not before flipping a middle finger to infuriate the chief one last time. At that moment, a subordinate rushed over to report that only 3 bodies were found in the prison. The chief finally realized Hyun had been stalling the entire time to let the others escape. Veins bulged on his forehead. Even if we have to tear this entire mountain apart, find him. Meanwhile, Hyun had hit the water, but the speed of his fall was terrifying. He was sure he'd hit the bottom, but thankfully, his descent slowed. Then he realized he was caught in a massive whirlpool. His luck couldn't possibly get any worse. Was this really how he was going to die? With no strength to resist, he had to let the current take him. Then, using a final burst of energy, he finally broke through the surface. "I'm alive!" At that moment, he felt a surge of spiritual energy reacting within his core. It was a child ginseng. He walked over and pulled it from the ground. Its uncanny resemblance to a small child is how it got its name. He glanced around cautiously, then couldn't help but admire himself. "You damn hound. In the end, you were still a step too slow. From this day forward, nothing will go your way." Without hesitation, he took a massive bite. A wave of pure bliss washed over him. Spiritual energy coursed through his body as he frantically devoured the rest. He then sat to meditate, absorbing the power to restore his strength. At that very moment, the Huang family's steward was searching for him. But since Hyun wasn't using his real name, the search was nearly impossible. They only knew he'd been in the area. The steward recalled just a few days ago, while he was still sleeping in, the family head had personally kicked him in the face. That was when the steward realized Hyun had vanished, forcing him to face the full wrath of Hyun's father. If the others hadn't held him back, the steward might not have survived that day. And so, the steward ran for his life to find him. Meanwhile, with the people Hyun had rescued, the old man who had guided Hyun was now leading them back to their village. He asked around about the bandaged young man, but no one had any answers. The goons from the Nine Dragons Fortress had scoured every possible location, but still couldn't find Hyun. Suddenly, a figure emerged from behind the waterfall. It was Hyun himself. "Are you all here to welcome me? You've saved me the trouble of hunting you down." His transformation was so stunning, they couldn't possibly recognize him as the masked man from yesterday. They just assumed he was some handsome lunatic. All he wanted was to borrow a dry shirt. But they refused, and were promptly beaten into submission. Unfortunately, their clothes were absolutely disgusting. In the end, the entire group was left stripped bare, shivering helplessly in the bitter cold. Then, with a casual flick of his blade, he sent one of them to the afterlife. Panic erupted as the others tried to flee, but was escape even an option? He cut them down with ruthless speed. Only then did our hero glance at his reflection in the water. What a handsome devil. This flawless skin had to be the effect of the child ginseng. He just stood by the lake, captivated by his own reflection. It was almost pathetic. His self-admiration was cut short by screams in the distance. The villagers had been recaptured, and the kind old man who had helped him was being brutally beaten by the thugs. They froze the moment they saw him. Hyun's next move was bizarre. He knelt down and started packing a snowball. He actually wanted a snowball fight, but with his strength, it was less a snowball and more a cannonball. Anyone it hit, their heads simply exploded. He moved like a bolt of lightning, a single heaven-shattering blow scattering the bandits. That was the Wudang clan's ultimate sword technique, the heaven-piercing, sea-splitting sword. Of course, with his dashing new looks, they still had no idea who he was. But when he saw the kind old man beaten to a pulp, something inside Hyun finally snapped. He cleaved the attacker in two with a single strike, then walked toward the elder. His face had changed, but his eyes were the same. The old man recognized him instantly. Hyun used his spiritual energy to heal the man's wounds, though it wasn't a permanent fix, but it was enough to soothe the pain. He then ordered one of the others to carry the elder. He told them to head straight for the village and to never look back, because on this day, the Nine Dragons Fortress would be wiped from existence. Hyun marched directly on their main base. He roared the name of their leader, San-so. His confidence stemmed from his breakthrough to the Hyunji realm. At this level, his internal energy was limitless. However, spiritual energy was on another level entirely. It could cut through and destroy anything. A thug was still running his mouth. "Who the hell are you to cause a scene here?" and was instantly silenced. Hyun moved like a phantom, launching a one-man massacre. A hail of arrows rained down, but he deflected them all with ease. At last, the bald-headed leader was forced to appear. He had returned. Model. Stronger than ever before, he was ready to take them all on. Just then, a familiar voice called out. It was Steward Hong. He had brought his men to annihilate the Nine Dragons Fortress, and his own skills were nothing to scoff at. He was a martial artist, after all. The fortress leader, however, ordered his men to charge forward without fear. But the coward himself turned to flee. Did he really think he could escape that easily? He didn't even recognize the hero's new, surgically altered face. But the moment he saw that raised middle finger, realization finally struck him. A wave of pure terror washed over him. How could this man have become so overwhelmingly powerful overnight? For the first time, he could see the immense power radiating from our hero. This was a true master. Rushing forward meant certain death, so he dropped to his knees and begged for his life. He promised anything he desired: gold, silver, beautiful women. When others begged you for mercy, the hero asked, "Did you ever spare them? You've spent your entire life preying on the weak and defenseless. Did you ever once hold back? You've never shown mercy to anyone, so don't you dare seek compassion from others now." With a single, swift slash, the leader's fate was sealed. At that moment, Steward Hoang arrived, having finished off the grunts, but he completely failed to recognize that the man before him was his very own young master. He just assumed the stranger also held a grudge against the Nine Dragons Fortress. In a hilarious twist, he began asking the hero about his own young master. "Our young master is about your age, young hero. He has a similar build and a rather stubborn personality. Back then, he had absolutely no manners and looked down on everyone he met. What's more, he used to eat as much as a cow. I mean, no disrespect to him by saying that, of course." This guy was clearly asking for a beating. Once he learned the hero's identity, he did a complete 180. "I can't believe it. In the short time we've been apart, the young master has become such a beauty. In fact, I recognized you from the very beginning." The steward then urged him to return home, but Hyun's work wasn't finished. He still had to kill that vile fiend, causing so much chaos. Steward Hoang immediately pulled out the security team's rope, intending to drag him home by force. Of course, Hyun refused to cooperate. He tried to make a run for it, but the steward's rope snared him. Just as he was being hauled away, Hyun was forced to unleash his power, sending the steward flying. This level of strength left everyone stunned. How had the young master become so powerful in just a few months? Following their orders from the family head, they all prepared to attack him at once. Just then, the old man Hyun had saved appeared. Thanking him for his life, he delivered some good news. The hostages had all escaped safely, and they were eternally grateful. He had saved countless people that day, but Hyun had exhausted too much of his chi. Seizing the opportunity, the steward tied him up and carried him away. He thrashed wildly, screaming, "The peace of the martial world is in my hands. I have to go take care of that bastard villain." But the steward merely thought he was bluffing. With a swift chop to the neck, he knocked him out. Hoang then warned his men not to speak of the young master's heroic deeds, because the people of the martial world are a dangerous sort. The more famous one becomes, the more enemies they attract. Meanwhile, a long-haired old man stood where the child ginseng had been, but it was gone. This was the very offering he was meant to present to his young lord. Who dares to steal it? A terrifying aura exploded from his entire being. He immediately dispatched his subordinates with a single order: find the ginseng thief at all costs. If someone has already consumed the child ginseng, I will rip their stomach open and retrieve it myself. Not only that, but their entire family will suffer the same tragic fate. Everyone connected to the thief must be utterly annihilated. This old man was a true monster. Meanwhile, the thief was being unceremoniously dragged home. He lamented his missed opportunity to finally kill the wicked Jugu, and finally enjoy the peaceful life of a wealthy man. But he was immediately captured and dragged back home. Still, he had succeeded in stealing the item. According to his past life's memories, the next target was the 2,000-year-old divine beast. Their journey had brought them to an high city. The place was just as he remembered, a grand, bustling city that his own father had also traveled to. Hyun was expecting a warm embrace, but instead, his father stormed up to the butler, fuming. "Are you playing games with me? Where is Hyun?" The butler immediately pointed to him, leaving everyone stunned. His father's rage only intensified. "Are you mocking me? How could that handsome young man be my son? My boy is a chubby, round little thing." It wasn't until Hyun called out to him that his father froze. Could this person really be his son? "Spill it. Where did you get this complete makeover?" When the Namgong patriarch learned Hyun had single-handedly annihilated the Nine Dragons' Den, he was utterly stunned, unable to believe it. He almost accused his subordinate of spouting nonsense. This was, after all, his only son, the heir to the entire family fortune, and a boy with immense natural talent. After losing weight, the boy was like an unpolished diamond, his true brilliance finally revealed. The next logical step was to arrange the marriage between their two families. The following day, the Namgong elder and Hyun's father were discussing having him join the martial arts tournament. With the right master to guide and forge his skills, he could even surpass a renowned general. He could even have his name carved into the history books as a legendary commander, a true pillar of the empire. And where would they find such a master? He was standing right in front of them. The man himself was the Sword King, Namgong Clan, and the Namgong family was one of the most prestigious clans, with a powerful foothold in the martial world for generations. By borrowing the Namgong name, Hyun would gain countless opportunities to enter the world of Murim. Better yet, Hyun could finally escape the Yu household for a while. Soon, the two old men were back to their cringy, brotherly banter. His father also mentioned that the emperor was currently deciding on the matter of succession. It seemed His Majesty wanted Lord Yu to personally mentor the crown prince. This made entrusting his son to the Namgong clan an incredibly convenient arrangement. The next day, his father bid him farewell to return home, but not before giving him an endless list of instructions and promises. The Namgong elder was just as dramatic, making Hyun want to die of embarrassment. His new master then simply told him to follow. They took a long tour around the Namgong estate, eventually climbing the fortress wall to gaze out over the lands. As expected of the Sword King, he could perform the void step, walking on air itself. Not even his master from his previous life had ever achieved such a feat. Then, he called for Hyun to join him on the roof. Hyun knew instantly that this was a test. While he couldn't walk on air, he cleared the distance in a single, powerful leap. Your movements are not half bad. Next, the master gestured to the vast lands under the Namgong family's control. Impressively vast, isn't it? Hyun braced himself, assuming he was about to be ordered to run laps around the entire territory as part of his training. But the old man simply said, "This is all a part of my family's immense fortune." Hyun nearly lost his footing. What on earth? The Sword King truly was different. His way of thinking was completely outside the norm. He then offered Hyun a share of this enormous fortune, revealing that he wanted to marry his granddaughter, the Namgong young lady, to him, with the land as her dowry. He could have just said so from the start, but instead, he dragged Hyun around all morning with this roundabout pitch. This new master of his was certainly a master of dramatics. Hyun leaped down, but the old man wouldn't give up, yelling, "If it's not enough, I'll add more." How annoying. The one thing Hyun didn't need was money. The patriarch then offered to hand over the entire Namgong family estate, if only Hyun would agree to marry his granddaughter. He was really going all out. But with so much to do, Hyun couldn't even think about getting married this early. The Sword King pressed on. All of Anping County is peaceful and prosperous. Besides, the emperor himself shows the utmost respect to your father every time they meet. All of them were rewarded with gold, silver, and precious jewels. That's why, even for the great Namgong family, there's no real reason I have to get married, right? I thought you were finally going to teach me martial arts, so my hopes were sky high. The next day, his master woke him at the crack of dawn for sword practice. The blade work was masterful and sharp. This was the emperor's sword. The next illustration showed him countless techniques that looked absolutely unreal. He only stopped when he was completely exhausted. These are sacred arts passed down only to the family's direct bloodline. But if you marry my granddaughter, I'll teach you everything. Hyun was about to make a run for it, but the old man clung to him, pleading relentlessly. The martial arts of the Kung family were an accumulation of hundreds of years of wisdom, with profound meaning in every single move. But this guy just scoffed, saying he understood it all at a glance. "Here, let me show you." He then picked up a simple tree branch. After all, he had already mastered the Namgong family's techniques under his master in a past life. Just like that, he flawlessly executed the form he had just seen, leaving the old man frozen in place. The old man's shock instantly turned to rage as he roared, "Where did you learn the Namgong sword arts? Didn't you just perform a whole sword dance for me a second ago?" To master a technique after seeing it only once, he was truly a prodigy, the kind seen only once in 1,000 years. This only fueled his desire to have Hyun marry his granddaughter, no matter the cost. At that same moment, a group of figures in black cloaks arrived in Anhui City. They bribed their way to get information on the one who stole the child ginseng, unaware it was his name from a previous life. The following day, the young master of the Namgong family came looking for Hyun to learn the Namgong heart method, but he was still busy sleeping in. He refused to believe his grandfather's story. that someone could learn a technique just by watching. This guy had to be using a cheat code. He had no idea that he himself was the very master who had taught Hyun these arts in their previous life. The Namgong young master immediately challenged him to a duel. After all the suffering he endured in his past life, Hyun had been itching to give this guy a proper beatdown for a long time. It was a duel he gladly accepted. The young master's face instantly twisted with anger. "You're getting this arrogant just because I called you uncle and showed you some respect, aren't you? You are the most conceited person I have ever met. So full of yourself, thinking you're the best." Veins bulged on his forehead, his face contorted with rage, but Hyun just smirked and provoked him further. "Your insults are so weak. You've clearly never been in a real argument." In his past life, this man was known as the Seven Emotions Sword King, because he had elevated 7 human emotions into ultimate martial arts techniques. So when the sun was shining, he'd be in a bad mood and take it out on Hyun. When it rained, his mood would also sour, and he'd use Hyun as his personal training dummy. Basically, in a 24-hour day, his mood would swing 12 times, leaving Hyun beaten to a pulp every single day. And now was his chance for payback. Hyun used the immortal wind step, closing the distance between them in a flash. This guy had a temper hotter than a volcano. "I'll show you the difference between a cheap imitation and the real deal." His power was decent, but he was still just a kitten. With a 180-degree spin, Hyun launched a kick that completely shattered his stance. He then rushed forward, throwing a single punch. Even with his internal energy barrier up for defense, the fist found a crack and broke right through. That one punch sent him crashing to the ground. Only then did he finally admit it. This man was a true genius. But it wasn't over. Hyun approached him with a vicious look on his face. All that could be heard next were his blood-curdling screams. He finally understood the satisfaction his master must have felt. He even told the young master they should have private training sessions more often. This was clearly just physical torture. For 10 straight days, he was still getting completely overwhelmed. The young master of Namgong had certainly grown stronger, his blade now seething with pure rage. But it wasn't nearly enough to stand against our hero. Still, this was progress. It was time for him to make a move. Meanwhile, a shadowy group was digging into Jin Young's background, poring over a list of names. One name immediately stood out: Ryu Hyun, the only son of the great Yue Chung. Without hesitation, they dispatched agents to watch his every move. As for Ryu Hyun, he was simply buying a stack of books. Born to a noble family, he'd never known a day of hunger or hardship. This was the only path he could see to get close to the Seven Emotions sect. And just as expected, the Watchers were already in place. There were far more of them than he anticipated. Suddenly, his path was blocked. A pack of local thugs had come to collect their protection fees. Though he was a master of internal arts, using his power now would instantly expose his identity. So, he had no choice but to endure the painful beating. The young Namgong master rushed to intervene, but was stopped in his tracks. The real world isn't always like what you read in books. This isn't our fight. There is no reason to get involved. Hefei is Namgong family territory. No other sect would dare cause trouble here. The only ones left to struggle in the shadows are the beggars. But the moment they were gone, the so-called beggar revealed his true, terrifying power. A dangerous aura exploded from him, forcing everyone to their knees, begging for their lives. But could they be spared? They were all slaughtered mercilessly, save for one who managed to flee into the night. The next day, the Namgong patriarch was fuming. His granddaughter, 𝐒𝐒𝐒, had refused her arranged marriage. She had left for the battlegrounds of the 4 factions. The letter she left behind was written in advance. He then unleashed his fury on his own son. With no other choice, he decided Ryu Hyun would have to go in her place. But when he finally found Ryu Hyun, he stumbled upon a very unusual scene. Ryu Hyun was clearly instructing his grandson, who was swinging his sword through a flood of tears. Sensing the patriarch's arrival, they both stopped immediately. The old master asked if Ryu Hyun was teaching swordsmanship, but he simply said they were testing each other's skills. He couldn't risk revealing his identity, but the sword techniques Ryu Hyun used were far from ordinary. If he didn't learn it from a master, how could this kid possibly know such a style? Ryu Hyun had to lie. He claimed it was the 7 Emotions sword style, a technique he had awakened on his own. He explained it was a way of wielding a sword imbued with raw emotion. A flicker of understanding crossed the patriarch's face. The Namgong family's swordsmanship had grown complacent, lost in pleasure. It needed to evolve to survive in this new era. Just then, a servant rushed in with an urgent report. Members of the Beggar Sect had arrived. It seemed something terrible had befallen them last night. Ryu Hyun saw this as the perfect chance to slip out. His pursuers hadn't had an opportunity to strike, until now. The fish was practically leaping into the net. They just needed Hyun to wander somewhere secluded, and they could make their move. This place was far more prosperous than Anping County. A wave of homesickness washed over him for a moment, before he carefully scanned his surroundings. Just as he suspected, he was being followed. The vagrant from yesterday was now dressed like a wealthy merchant. Something was definitely wrong. This man was likely connected to last night's incident with the Beggar Sect. With a sudden burst of speed, he darted into a dead-end alley, then reappeared on the rooftops above. He needed to know exactly why they were tailing him. They realized their surveillance had been blown since last night. Their only option was a swift and silent kill. They all charged forward, aiming to silence him for good, not knowing the monster they had just awakened. Countless stones were already in his hand. He unleashed a furious barrage of attacks, shattering their formation in an instant. Effortlessly, he snatched one of the assassins right out of the air. Suddenly, the air grew thick with an overwhelming killing intent. It was coming from him. To erase every trace of his mission, the leader mercilessly slaughtered his own men before trying to escape. But did he really think he could run? Not when Hyun was hunting him down at full speed. At that very moment, reinforcements from the Namgong Clan and the Beggar Sect arrived on the scene. The leader knew so that capture meant disaster. From within his robes, he drew an explosive hidden weapon for a surprise attack. But Hyun had already vanished, only to reappear and send the man flying with a devastating blow. As he crashed to the ground, the man finally realized Hyun had been hiding his true power all along. The victor always has the right to ask questions, doesn't he? So tell me, what organization do you serve? Unsurprisingly, the captive refused to utter a single word. His subordinates were likely already dead. If he was going down, he'd drag Hyun down with him. Very well. If you're so eager to die, I'll end this in a single strike. The man scoffed, thinking it was an empty threat. The moment his foe closed the distance, a single flash of the blade took him down. Hyun stood perfectly still. I will show you the meaning of a truly formless technique. The calm before the storm is the most dangerous. The art I am about to use can shatter the very heavens. Rooting himself to the ground, he unleashed all the spiritual energy stored in his body. A single punch was all it took to overwhelm the old master. This was the 100 Steps Divine Fist, a legendary Shaolin technique. What looked like a simple punch actually contained the force of hundreds of strikes. I can't properly interrogate him out here. First, I need to take him back to the Namgong Clan. But just then, members of the Beggar Sect arrived, demanding to have a word with the prisoner. After confirming the man's identity, they declared that the Beggar Sect would handle the matter from now on. The elder from the Beggar Sect could tell the captive was a true master, yet he'd been defeated by a mere boy. Clearly, this young man was no ordinary warrior. The elder then explained their reason for being there. We are hunting the very group that wiped out a small branch of our Beggar Sect, and this man is one of the culprits. But tell me, young master, why were you fighting them? It seemed they were pursuing someone. I imagine they mistook me for their actual target. He was obviously hiding something, but the elder knew he couldn't press the boy for answers. Still, he couldn't allow his sect to lose face over this matter. Countless eyes are watching from the shadows, and the organization behind them is immensely powerful. If the Beggar Sect keeps digging around, it could complicate my plans. Still, capturing him saved me a lot of time. Hearing about a powerful secret organization, the elder grew excited and demanded they hand over the prisoner. That's not happening. The Beggar Sect did nothing, while I fought them tooth and nail. Just look at me! My clothes are torn to shreds, and I'm covered in wounds. He then glanced at the Namgong young master for support, but the boy refused to get involved. He even flinched, as if expecting to be struck. Hyun knew he had to handle this situation carefully. Can't you see you're putting my uncle in a terrible position? Please, young master, I'm begging you. This is a matter of our Beggar Sect's honor. In the end, Hyun relented, but on one condition. They had to inform him the moment they discovered the prisoner's identity. That night, Hyun carefully planned his next move. In 6 months, his enemy would find a clue to the second sacred artifact, Hoang Duke Sam of the Mokchil clan. But everything changed when I took the Dongjia Ginseng for myself. Because he failed to obtain the Dongjia Ginseng, he'll move much faster to secure the second artifact. The following day, Hyun told the clan leader he wished to join the martial alliance to gain more experience. The leader was overjoyed by this news. I will contact Huini at once to offer you her assistance. He's suggesting you two should meet often and grow closer. It seems the old man still hasn't given up on playing matchmaker. He then ordered the young clan master to accompany Hyun. His grandfather was about to object, but to his surprise, The boy immediately agreed. He packed his bags before leaving, but not without a parting whisper. Besides 𝐒𝐒𝐒, aren't there 5 other great masters? They are the living legends who represent the orthodox martial arts world. It's said they're breathtakingly beautiful. Something to look forward to. Hearing this, the old family head instantly panicked. Summon everyone. Convene a family meeting, right now. Afterwards, he and Ryan began their journey. They chose to travel by sea, a path fraught with peril. If their luck ran out, they could run into the water dragon king, 𝐒𝐒𝐬. Just then, a sailor's warning cry cut through the air. The black whale has been spotted. It's swarming with pirates. The captain had no choice but to offer gold as a passage fee, hoping they would quickly depart. But this time, they were looking for someone. I get it, a pirate sneered. You're known for smuggling criminals, and just as suspected, the captain had stowed someone away in the cargo hold. To save his own life, he confessed everything. The pirate leader roared, I'm looking for a fugitive who escaped, so if you all cooperate, there won't be any trouble. Now, everyone line up. But Hyun paid them no attention whatsoever. He was too busy admiring the ocean view when one of the pirates walked up and slugged him. Although fury blazed inside him, he forced himself to endure it. Causing a scene would only lead to a bigger disaster. The men from below deck surged upward, and the fighting exploded once more. In that moment, Hyun recognized the man before him by the red serpent tattoo on his skin. According to his past life's memories, this man knew the location of the second sacred artifact. His name was Hoang Do-cham. The shockwaves from their battle alone were strong enough to injure innocent bystanders. Jun had to unleash his swift sword style to accelerate his blade, deflecting every incoming wave of force. The bearded thug saw an opening and lunged for the kill, but Hyun intercepted him. A single punch sent the old man flying, before Hyun turned his attention to the other man. You're Hoang Do-san, aren't you? I can tell by the look on your face. That's why I'm going to save you. I just have something to ask you. But the man suddenly dove into the water to escape. Even after he was offered protection, Hyun had no choice but to leave the bearded man to Jun. He then plunged straight into the water, chasing after his target. The water was his domain. These low-level thugs were no match for him. He used their bodies as stepping stones, propelling himself forward with lightning speed. Gliding across the surface, he closed the distance in an instant, striking terror into his fleeing target. Could he be a supreme master, capable of walking on water? The fugitive launched himself into a desperate attack, only to be sent flying by a single punch. Hyun only wanted to ask him a few questions, but this guy thought he was here to end his life. He had to strike his pressure points to immobilize him, then turned to deal with the pirates swimming after them. Hyun stomped hard, kicking up a cloud of rock and debris. He used them like hidden weapons, launching them forward. Countless men were struck down, and the faces of the survivors turned pale with fear. It was too late for them to escape as a single strike ended their lives. Now, for the main event, he used his alias, Jin Yigong. He couldn't risk revealing his identity, in case this man was connected to his enemies. Where is the 1,000-year purple shell? The man was stunned. How do you know about that? He then tried to play dumb, claiming ignorance, but his initial reaction was a dead giveaway. It looked like Hyun would have to give him a bit of gentle persuasion. In the distance, Jun approached on a small boat, and the sight before him seemed strangely familiar. Meanwhile, after being beaten black and blue, the target was finally ready to talk. But before he could utter a word, the massive black whale ship reappeared. The bearded man began to gloat. You little brats! Scared now? Get ready to die! He didn't even finish his sentence before Hyun knocked him senseless, then turned back to his prisoner. Sangzeon had unexpected guests, and he had to give them a proper welcome. Just then, 2 figures stormed the black whale, and news of this immediately reached the Martial Alliance's grand strategist. A fierce battle was raging on the Yangtze River, with enemies swarming from its depths. They were demanding that we open the river gates. This was the clear beginning of a crisis on the Yangtze. And wasn't he the one responsible? An order was immediately issued. Master of the Blue Dragon Guild, mobilize to the western entrance of the Yangtze River at once. Arm yourselves. We cannot surrender such a vital waterway to the enemy. Based on the reports, the one approaching could very well be the Water Dragon King. On top of that, the little beggar dragon of the Beggar Sect was also spotted nearby. Meanwhile, our hero was fighting for his life against the Black Whale's forces. They were an endless, relentless horde, and a real pain in the neck. Suddenly, an intruder launched himself onto their ship. It was the little beggar dragon himself, one of the top leaders of the Beggar Sect. So you'd best back down, because from now on, this ship is under my protection. When Hyun saw him, he thought he looked like a Sheba and wondered if he was a foreigner. But at that moment, a fleet of ships began to advance on their position. This was the Water Dragon King, the notorious leader of the Shu faction. Hyun immediately ordered the bearded helmsman to change course, but from a small boat below, an old man unleashed his power, stopping their ship dead in its tracks. A display of power this insane was on a completely different level. In the next instant, the old man appeared directly before them. Everyone immediately bowed their heads in reverence to the Water Dragon King. His black-clad guard moved with terrifying speed, instantly capturing the little beggar dragon. But the Water Dragon King noticed that in that split second, Hyun had somehow managed to track his impossible movements. Hyun quickly played dumb. Whoa, when did that old geezer get over here? Surely a man of your stature wouldn't bother himself with a pup who's still wet behind the ears. The king then ordered his subordinate to release the little beggar dragon. Then, he unleashed his terrifying aura, demanding they explain everything that had transpired. Hyun chose his words with extreme care. The truth is, we were on our way to Wuhan, but when an enemy appeared and threatened the lives of innocent civilians, we made the decision to save them. This explanation, however, seemed to only make the old man even angrier. Hyun was forced to play another card, revealing his identity as a descendant of the old general of Anping County. You probably wouldn't know of us. Our family has absolutely no connection to the martial world. However, in the imperial court, we hold considerable influence. My father is currently in Nanjing under the emperor's direct command, caring for the new crown prince. But the Water Dragon King remained as cold as ice. And what in the hell does that have to do with me? Hearing those words, a cold sweat dripped down Hyun's back. Just as he feared, pulling the "my father is a big shot" card couldn't intimidate this man. I am a pirate. I was born a pirate, and I will die a pirate. Whether you're an official or a martial artist, what difference does it make to me? Dealing with these two monsters was far beyond his current abilities. At his current level of strength, if he charged in, someone would be burning incense for him this time next year. It was like staring at a magnificent feast, but only being able to smell the aroma. He then recalled his master's teaching. If you address what your opponent fears and use it to corner them, you can offer what you want as if it were a great favor. At that moment, Hyun completely changed his tactics. Please spare my life. In return, allow me to compensate you with a gift worthy of your greatness. He figured a pirate would never refuse money, but the old man just let out a booming laugh, completely baffling him. He then closed the distance and said, "You're a very interesting little brat." Just then, members of the Martial Alliance arrived on the scene, yet they all stood perfectly still, just watching from afar. "Do you know why?" the king asked. "They're busy calculating whether they stand to gain or lose by stepping in. What would they gain? Well, if they decided to face me directly, that is a different matter entirely. Going against him head-on would be suicide. And from the way he spoke, he could wipe this place clean without breaking a sweat. Just a moment ago, I thought I could negotiate to save everyone, but he simply sized me up. My own power might be pathetic, but my eyes could track his every single move. He needed to test me himself, then immediately ordered his underlings to attack. But in a flash, Ki-eun intercepted his terrifying speed. Charging into battle with a monster like this, I have to end it in one decisive blow. Confronting me directly? You are at a grave disadvantage. My spiritual energy is proportional to its purity. It cannot be dodged, nor can it be blocked. Suddenly, a cold laugh echoed. The Water Dragon King had appeared behind him, striking from the shadows. And just like that, Ki-eun's world went dark. Seon tried to charge forward, but a single glare from the Water Dragon King was enough to overwhelm him. But to save his uncle, Seon unleashed his sword arts, launching himself into a life-or-death struggle against the master. The old man, however, recognized the boy's immense potential. He couldn't bring himself to extinguish such a promising flame. With time, a talent like that could achieve true greatness. With a single stomp of his foot, a terrifying shockwave erupted, sending waves dozens of meters high, and in an instant, they vanished. Hyun awoke to the smell of grilled meat. First things first, I need to fill my stomach. Whether I live or die will have to wait for the next chapter. He realized the Water Dragon King had taken him. Seeing no one else, he assumed they'd been slaughtered, and his eyes blazed with killing intent. But it turned out the king had spared them, sending them to a righteous sect for their own safety. That kid from the Namgong Clan took a hit, but when he wakes up, his body will be even better for it. Although I hold a deep grudge against his clan, I'm not so petty as to crush every ant that crosses my path. With that, our hero tossed his pride aside to fill his starving belly. After all, One must eat to fight another day. Meanwhile, at a nearby clinic, Sion was receiving treatment. He was lucky the Water Dragon King showed mercy. Otherwise, his life would have been forfeit. Though no one could understand the Water Dragon King's true intentions, the pressure he used was clearly not enough to shatter the boy's meridians. Before leaving, he even told the members of the Beggar Sect to take good care of him. I must dispatch a letter to the Namgong family at once. When he gets the news, the normally stoic Sword King will likely fly into a towering rage. Elsewhere, someone was casually enjoying wine and grilled meat. The Water Dragon King was acting like a friendly neighborhood grandpa, making casual conversation. The situation was completely surreal. After finding out he was only 17 and already this powerful, the king was stunned and asked who his master was. If I admit my master is the Namgong Sword King, he'll bury me on the spot. I had no choice but to say my brother-in-law taught me. He's a member of the Ram family from Hubei, after all. But this old man was an expert on the Ram family's martial arts. Their style is wild and domineering. It could never be as fluid and refined as yours. Furthermore, your attack methods and internal energy circulation are completely different from any conventional technique. It feels more fundamental somehow. The old master was utterly fascinated by him. That was the first time I've ever seen energy circulated in such a bizarre way. Then, he decided to make me his disciple. What is even happening? If I became his disciple, he would spare my life. I had to choose my next words very carefully. My mission is to save the martial world, and now I'm supposed to take the enemy as my master? This feels incredibly wrong. I wanted to refuse, but his presence was overwhelming, and his words carried an undeniable weight. If I accept him as my master, my father back home will be heartbroken. At that moment, veins began to bulge on the Water Dragon King's forehead, ready to teach him a lesson. In the next moment, only agonizing screams were heard. The old man's methods were swift and brutal. If words don't work, fists will. After a moment of thought, our hero finally came up with a plan. He would agree to be a temporary disciple, and nothing more. The priority right now was finding that guy named Sam to get intel on the second sacred treasure. He then explained, if word got out that I became your disciple, it would draw a lot of unwanted attention my way. If that happens, I'll become a prime target for your enemies. So, please, try to understand my position. I need time to build up my experience, so that one day, I can become a disciple who brings you glory throughout the world. Hearing this, the old man was both shocked and ecstatic. This kid truly had ambition, but he followed up with a threat. If any of that was a lie, everything related to him would be utterly erased from existence. He then turned to his hulking subordinate, relaying an order to the guards at the Yangtze River. From now on, Hyun is the young master. However, this information must not be revealed to anyone. As Hyun walked away, he was crying on the inside. It wasn't that he'd abandoned his pride after a beating. It's just that the old man hit really, really hard. This was all just part of his strategy. Not long after he left, the Sword King arrived. He was here to settle the score with the Water Dragon King for daring to lay a hand on his grandson. The two titans immediately erupted into a furious, storm-like argument. The Water Dragon King's unofficial disciple and grandson-in-law wanted to take his man back? Dream on. Both unleashed their terrifying auras, attempting to crush one another with sheer pressure. But this battle was pointless. Hyun was already gone. Only then did the two finally stand down. Afterward, they sat down for a drink together. Truly, monsters and beasts have the most unpredictable tempers. Meanwhile, upon his return, Hyun was immediately apprehended by the Martial Alliance. His identity as the young master hadn't been exposed yet, but they still needed to conduct a thorough investigation. He was brought for an audience with the master of the Martial Alliance, Baek Woo Laiha Haseon. Upon hearing her name, he could already sense a gentle and serene voice. But after actually hearing it, why did it carry such a heavy feeling? It wasn't killing intent. It felt more like the oppressive weight of a true powerhouse. Just being in her presence was enough to freeze a person solid. His former master once said that if the Alliance Master had been around, she might have prevented the great chaos. She looked him over, assessing him. Only 17 years old, yet his power was already at a respectable level. And his eyes, they were like those of a great dragon. No wonder he could face the Water Dragon King alone. The person beside her was also incredibly sharp, perhaps even comparable to his old literature teacher. They wanted to know the cause of the battle at the Yangtze River. He started spouting nonsense again, claiming it was just an act of righteous heroism. He stepped in to save someone, but also ended up punching the person he saved. Who could possibly make sense of that? He just wanted to squeeze information about the sacred artifact out of the guy. As expected, she laid numerous conversational traps, but he saw them coming a mile away and wasn't baited. As for how he escaped the Water Dragon King's clutches, simple. His family is rich. What could they say to that? The Alliance Master assessed him carefully one more time. This kid was definitely no ordinary person. The Master was currently gathering talents to join the Hidden Dragon Squad. She certainly couldn't pass up on this guy. After glancing through the roster, he immediately agreed, because it included all of his former masters. Of course, he couldn't pass up this perfect opportunity to make their lives a living hell. Haha! And that's a wrap for part 1. Don't forget to hit like for the Go channel.